ItsMotherWho.com.
What happened to the credits?
I don't know. It's missing from my lineup of things here.
Oh my goodness.
No opening.
You're feeling okay?
Names, faces.
Okay, well,
we're live!
to Talking Who. I'm Sean Harry.
And I'm Melazar Cabrera.
And we're going to spend the next hour talking about Who. You can also follow us on Twitter. We tweet at Sean Harry, which is kind of easy, and his is at Ellie Cab.
Indeed, absolutely.
Which sounds like a cab company.
Well, it's supposed to.
You can also find us on YouTube. You can find us on, got a website, talkingwho.com. Got a Facebook page.
Yep.
Got Twitter account.
Twitter.com talkingwho, and throughout the show I will be checking it and reading out any tweets you may have.
Interesting.
For us.
If you want to send us any comments throughout the show, it's interactive. Send us a tweet, and we will discuss what you've said. Potentially, if what you said interesting. If you tweet us like somebody did last time, like who is our favourite Transformer?
Yes. He had got the wrong show. He thought he was talking formers or talking trans.
Talking crap.
Talking crap.
He talking bay.
Anyway. T. Chalky says, when Doctor Who returns, will we be live every week? Well,
probably.
We'll try, but it's in September, and I'm going to be on holiday in September, so we'll have to work out something.
Yeah, it's actually because I'm going to Atlanta as well.
Yeah, so we might start.
I'm off to DragonCon.
We might start doing that, have a break, and then have to do like a catch-up show or something. But of course, we are looking forward to the new series, and because the first episode of the new series is called Asylum with the Daleks, we thought we'd have a bit of a Dalek theme this week, and sort of in anticipation and build-up to the Asylum of the Daleks. So we will be looking at the last proper Dalek story, Victory of the Daleks, not including the Pandorica story, and where the Daleks all began with their entire genesis. We'll later in the show we will be looking at Genesis of the Daleks. One of my personal favourites, I'm sure one of yours as well.
But we're going to start off with some sad news.
Yeah.
Since the last show, we've lost not one but two.
We have, yes.
Companions.
We do indeed. Both Caroline John and Mary. Well, actually, Caroline John had passed away before our last show, so what we're going to bring you is actually Annie Fairfoul's tribute that was meant to be on the last show.
Okay.
She didn't get the Mary Town one in time for this one because obviously it's only very recently occurred, this news. But Romana one, sad, very very sad. Let's take all that stuff off our screen. Too many, losing too many, aren't we?
It's literally within the past 12 months.
And they're only in their 60s. It's just they're young.
It's Elizabeth Sladen's gone, Caroline John, Mary Tam, Nicholas Courtney.
Yeah.
It's, Barry Letts passed away as well. It's a very sad time for fans of classic Doctor Who from the 70s. Yeah,
indeed. But anyway, Annie Fairfoul, who does regular contributions for Talking Who, she has put together a tribute video to Caroline John. And next show we'll also then have one for Mary Town. So we'll hand you over now, straight over to Annie.
Hello, I'm Annie Fairfoul, here to pay tribute to Doctor Who's Caroline John, who passed away on the 5th of June. Caroline played Liz Shaw, assistant to John Pertwee's third Doctor. She was his first assistant. Now, having reviewed her performances and her later commentaries on them, I have to say that it's far easier to celebrate this tremendous actress than to mourn her. She played Liz with a cheeky, intelligent insouciance that had you grinning off to the side with her. Not that she sent it up, mind you, but, well, you take a look at her with the break.
Leave Earth. You were about to open it. Yes.
I think you should. There might be a policeman locked inside. Wrong key.
You see? It's a wonder her tongue doesn't poke a hole in her cheek. And when she spoke as herself, in this case commenting on another actor she was working with, her joyful intelligence is infectious.
Was so naughty. Now, John, I think it would be best if Caroline, would you like to stand this side of me, and John, you that side, and you knew Walter wanted to be in the middle. And he said, okay. But I never know how, I mean, luckily John was much taller, but it's quite a canny old fox. I liked him very much, and a wonderful actor.
Over the past 50 years, the actors who have served as companions have come from varied backgrounds, but as the Doctor Who bar points out, the lady had the chops. Carrie, born in York in 1940, trained at the Central School of Speech and Drama. She then worked in the theatre, touring with the Royal Shakespeare Company and the National Theatre. She also played the Earthbound Doctor's arguably only human intellectual equal, as Steve Taylor Bryant put it. For me, she brought the companion kicking and screaming into a modern age. Whilst Carolyn John was only briefly a companion, she brought an end to immature, screaming companions who'd been the norm throughout the 1960s. She was glamorous, yet mature, severe, yet friendly. To illustrate, here's Liz working with the Doctor for the first time.
Do I gather you're going to help us, Doctor?
If I do, will you give me the key to the TARDIS?
Possibly.
Then go away and let Miss Shaw and I get on with our work. There's a good fella. Look, I really have to call you Miss Shaw.
No, Liz, just Liz.
Liz, that's much better.
In fact, her tenure was so brief, only 4 episodes, because she was so strong. She was replaced by a more traditional assistant who would ask questions on behalf of the audience. Years later, as my friend KD points out, Stephen Moffat noted Liz Shaw was a template. The Doctor's companions should never be his assistants. They're the people who keep him on his toes. David at Big Finish summed her up when he wrote, Caroline was always enthusiastic about returning to the role of Liz for Big Finish, and every recording was just a very easy and happy day. It always makes me smile to remember that when Carrie wasn't in the recording booth, she'd gravitate towards the sink, doing the washing up, tidying the place up. The studio never looked so lovely as when she was in the building. Goodbye, Carrie. You made Liz Shaw smart. You made her fun. Just like you. Annie Fairfoul. Out.
Well, there you are. Thank you very much, Annie, for that.
Yes, thank you. It's very sad that.
Yeah, it was very, very sad. And well, I hope it's going to be a long time before we have to have news like that. Because it is, as you're saying, happening too frequently at the moment.
Yes.
But anyway,
so we're going to move on, and we're going to, as I said, the new series starts soon, and the first episode of the new series is Asylum of the Daleks. And
we're told it features lots of different
Daleks.
Daleks.
But apparently it features... Now, the Daleks have constantly been redesigned, but they haven't been redesigned like the Cyber. Every time the Cybermen turn up, quite frequently they have quite radical, complete redesigns, and each time you look at the Cybermen, they look quite different. The Dalek redesigns have always been far more subtle.
Slight
just
different
very
heights.
slight different change to height.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's they're
Colour,
filming in studio or they're filming on set, so the Daleks are modified to take advantage of whatever. There's been changes in colour. There's never been that but apparently every style of Dalek is going to be represented in this episode. And it does make me wonder, Asylum of the Daleks. Now, Asylum could have 2 meanings. It could either mean a mental institution, or it could mean a place of safety.
Of safety, sure.
And if every form of Dalek is there, I think either this could be a place where all the Daleks can go, knowing, this is a safe haven, or perhaps it could be some kind of facility where all the Daleks are being collected and examined. Well, wouldn't that make sense, for like the Earth, people fighting the Daleks or the Thals? We will have to wait and see what the episode's going to be.
Absolutely.
Even apparently they've even got the special weapons Dalek from Remembrance of the Daleks in there. So every single kind of Dalek.
But do they have the movie Claw Dalek?
They don't know. It's all the Daleks. Although oddly enough, it might be in there because a movie Dalek did make it into one Doctor Who story, and that was Planet of the Daleks,
right?
Where the Supreme Dalek was actually
a modified
movie Dalek, but they put a light in his eye, so his eye really did flash, but
because he was much bigger than all the others.
Yes,
it was obviously made from a different template.
And also in the Chase, the black and white story, but it wasn't quite prominent. They had a couple of movie Daleks in the background, but they weren't moving, and because the movie Daleks were bigger, they took off, the black little bit at the bottom, they took those off. So you can recognise the movie Daleks in the background because they don't actually have a kind of like a bottom skirt to them.
Well, we'll talk about the 60s and early 70s Daleks
when we
talk to Genesis, because obviously the Tom Baker story Genesis of the Daleks does create a particular, I suppose you could say, paradox to do with the Daleks. Anyway, but we'll talk about that later. But let's talk about
Victory of the
Daleks, which was Matt Smith's
first encounter with the Daleks.
Yes.
Do we have a clip?
We do have a clip.
Let's go straight into a clip and then we can talk about it.
What's that? Our new secret weapon!
The Daleks have no conscience, no mercy.
They will win me the war.
You cannot trust them.
Doctor Who, the journey continues.
This was one written by Mark Gatiss, who, of course, along with Stephen Moffat, created Sherlock.
Yep.
And he's one, and also created the very popular TV series The League of Gentlemen. And he's one of those people. It's very interesting. It became inevitable Doctor Who was going to come back.
Yeah.
Because what was very clear was all the top writers and producers in the BBC, such as Stephen Moffat, such as Russell T Davies and Stephen Moffat, there were all these people who'd grown up with Doctor Who and loved Doctor Who.
Yeah.
So in the 80s and 90s, you had people within the BBC working on the BBC who didn't like Doctor Who, couldn't care less about it as a show. So in the 80s, financially, the show received no help or support or love, and then they cancelled it and we went without it in the 90s. But it had to come back because there were so many people working within the BBC
from a particular generation
who just loved the show, people like us, and Mark Gatiss is very much one of those type of people. And I felt in this, even though it's an hour long, I felt structurally it very much reminded me of a typical 4-part story. It was very much, I felt, in the mode of a classic Doctor Who Dalek adventure, and there was quite a few nods to a lot of classic Doctor Who stories, most notably the first Patrick Troughton story, Power of the Daleks.
Yeah.
Because in both of those, you had this thing where the Daleks have got this big ruse where they're pretending to be allies of the humans. And they had this phrase in Power of the Daleks where they kept on saying, "I am your slave." And in this one they go, "I am your soldier. Or something. And they say it in exactly the same kind of like condescending way they did in which Power of the Daleks now only exists as an audio recording.
Maybe not even
an
episode.
There's a couple of clips, but that's it. There's just the audio remain of it, but it's very much has reminiscence to that. The one kind of issue I did have in it is suddenly the RAF get this super technology and you kind of like wondering what happens at the end of the story and why wasn't this used in World War II?
Why didn't it change the entire scientific progress of the humankind at this point? Because it's technology that should be just taken away from them. But I know there's a lot of people criticise this just because of the new Daleks, but as you say, the story is absolutely fantastic.
Now you want to know something? The new Dalek, I felt the story was great, but the new Daleks, what I did like was throughout Russell T Davies's period, what was great in Russell T Davies's period was they said, right, the Daleks are fantastic, but they've also become a bit of a joke. They've got strengths and they've got weaknesses, and they've allowed over the course of the years of people to take to joke about the weaknesses. So the very first Dalek story, it was almost like, let's take everything that people laugh at about the Daleks and turn that on its head. People laugh it's got a sink plunger arm. Let's have it kill somebody horribly using that sink plunger arm. Let's see it actually why it's got an arm like that. People go on, Daleks can't go upstairs. Let's see it going up the stairs. Let's see it levitate. It was this idea kind of like, let's make everything cool about the Daleks. But then Russell T Davies gave it this backstory with the Time War that the Daleks have effectively been wiped out. And every episode they turned up in, then they were all wiped out at the end. So it was almost like every Dalek story throughout.
You can't just kill one Dalek, you have to kill millions of them.
But it's every time Christopher Eccleston or David Tennant face the Daleks, at the start, half the story is taken up with how have the Daleks come back from utter destruction, and then half the story is taken up with totally destroying the Daleks forever. So you're suddenly left in this situation where the next story has to go through all of that again. And I have to say, it was getting for me a bit tiresome. And you couldn't just do a Dalek story like Death to the Daleks or Power of the Daleks or something like that, with the Daleks just turn up and you have a battle and the Doctor has an adventure against them.
But it's just a particular group of Daleks. It's not every single Dalek that exists.
And it was for me, it was frustrating. And what I liked about this story, it was I almost felt like Stephen Moffat felt the same way, and said, let's do a story which just establishes, yes, the Daleks were wiped out, but now they're back, and that's it. And since then, the Daleks haven't had a Dalek story, but they've been brought back for cameos you couldn't have done during Russell T Davies's period. But on the flip side of it, the redesign. I felt the Daleks, as they originally were throughout classic Doctor Who, looked fantastic. It was just one of those designs the BBC, even given the low budget of Doctor Who, the Daleks are an iconic image. They look fantastic. When they redesigned them for the new series, they did a spectacular job. They took everything that was good about the original design, enhanced it, made it look solid. The new Daleks look brilliant. These ones, I don't know what they were on. I mean, they look terrible.
I don't have a problem with the fact that we have different colour Daleks.
You know something? The different coloured Daleks is a cool idea, and if you've watched the Peter Cushing films, actually I think it looks... I always
it looks cool.
And actually, I always thought, even just from a fan perspective, but also from a merchandising perspective, I always thought they should properly have different colours for different ranks of Daleks. For the leader Daleks and the generals and the basic soldiers and the scientists. And I felt the array of colours... But the way the colours were done, when you look at the way colours were done on previous Doctor Who stories, the way that they're very much bright day glow. It almost looks like Power Ranger Daleks.
They're too bright. That's the thing. It's like, have different colours, but...
And they don't
make
look
it more metallic.
They don't look solid. There's something
plastic.
about they look plastic. They look like Dalek bubble bath.
Yeah. That's really the problem, is that they're just a bit too... Well, it's not a problem of being too big. If the end result, as we will see in Asylum of the Daleks, if the rumours end up being true, that these 5 end up just really being supreme style
That's
Daleks.
what I've basically been heard a lot, is that they've kind of realised that these Daleks are not popular. So what we're going to have is that these 5 Daleks will be the ruling council, and then we will just have the classic Dalek design back on a more permanent basis.
And then you've also got ones that it's okay if they escape or they get away and the others get killed, because these ones are far superior to your general Dalek, and they're going to be 2 steps ahead of the Doctor now, because they can outthink him and they can make sure that they've always got.
Well, nobody can outthink the Doctor, but
a Dalek always thinks that they can.
Mr.
Tony Lee, who's watching, says redesign. Gatiss has mentioned that the hump was supposed to have CGI weapons that came out of the back.
Yes, I heard about that. Yes, but
I think it was actually really done because it made the guy inside have a bit more room to be able to.
Somebody put here. Remember, Sylvester McCoy wiped out Skaro.
That's Mr. Tony Lee again.
Well, yeah, Sylvester wiped out Skaro.
He did wipe out Skaro.
The actual in Dalek stories in Classic Who, there are very few stories actually centred on Scar. I mean, their biggest ever Dalek story, the Dalek Master Plan, their capital planet was the planet of Kemble.
Yes. You get the impression that the Daleks have left Skaro a long time ago.
And actually in the story Planet of the Daleks, it's pretty much established the Thals are still on Skaro and the Daleks have left. So if you look at Planet of the Daleks, then watch Remembrance of the Daleks, could be Sylvester McCoy blew up a bunch of Thals.
He could have. Well, that's always the ending that never really made sense in Remembrance. It was like, why would he destroy a planet when it's actually inhabited by other people? It's not just Daleks who live there.
Yeah.
That's...
Somebody asked, are the Daleks still capable of time travel? Maybe they're bringing all the Daleks from their own time stream. That's a possibility. Supposed to be in Doctor Who lore so far, it's pretty much the Daleks are one of the only races which have developed time travel to the level of the Time Lords have it.
Well, I mean, we have to... Well, I mean, time travelling creatures like the Daleks, like the Time Lords, they all their time streams seem to be parallel.
Yeah.
So it doesn't matter where they seem to go in. They whatever time they're back, forth, whatever, they seem to be running parallel to each other. So they always have shared memory of what's happened previously.
Yeah, that's just making it easier for the
That's
writers.
making it easier for the writer. I mean, realistically, there's no reason why he can't meet another pair of Daleks who actually don't know who the Doctor is.
Yeah.
Because it's time after all. But anyway, they're never going to do that. It's just you just have to accept that for ease of reference, and I think this is also going to happen. This is also the case with the Cybermen. Their time streams will always be parallel.
Well, you've only ever seen the Cybermen time travelling once. And their that was an Attack of the Cybermen, and the time capsule they used was one they'd stolen from another race.
Yeah.
So there's no but it's got to the state with Daleks where they actually have time machines built into their armour.
Well, no, they used to have their own TARDIS, essentially. And
they had their own TARDIS, they have time corridor technology, and now they have time displacement technology built into their armour. So,
but the question is, does every Dalek have that, or is it just certain Daleks?
Could have just been because it was the Cult of Starro we saw using that. So it could be just certain Daleks have that.
Who knows? But Victory of the Daleks, it's an enjoyable story.
I really enjoyed that.
It's good, and the fact that the Daleks do escape is
a
nice change.
It was good old-fashioned Doctor Who. It was a new, modern Doctor Who story, but it was one that if you're a fan of classic Doctor Who, it's kind of like one of those ones that you could tell was Mark Gatiss. He's a fan of Doctor Who in all its many forms.
And if you've been to the Cabinet War Rooms, the recreation of it is fantastic. I mean, it's really spot on, including the amount of telephones and the position of the telephones. What did you think then of Churchill and the Doctor having quite a history and knowledge of who the Doctor is and the fact that there is time travel?
But what I have to find is that one of the problems we're getting with 40-minute one-part stories like Victory of the Daleks, as opposed to the 4-part, 6-part classic Doctor Who ones you had, is you have to get on with the story much quicker. So when the Doctor arrives in an environment, I absolutely guarantee if this story had been written for as a Tom Baker 4-part story, the episode would have ended with the Daleks turning it within first meeting an Ironside Dalek.
Yeah.
And the first half of the episode would have been him meeting Churchill
being arrested
for the first time, Churchill having no idea who he was, and the Doctor having to explain prove to him why he's a good guy and why you can trust him.
Sure.
And you can't do that on classic Who. So on modern Who. So what you got to do is you got to kind of like create this kind of shorthand. And a character like Churchill, it makes absolute sense he might know the Doctor. The only thing is that he just seems to know Matt Smith's Doctor, which, considering that this was like his third story, and it was the first time
he does
he
does reference that he does reference that he's changed.
Yeah.
But the thing is, he does recognise him immediately as the Doctor, or maybe he just assumes it's the Doctor because he's walked out the TARDIS, so that yes, I think they have played on the fact that it might not necessarily be Matt Smith, but they're not.
Well, Doctor has had many adventures in the past, and it would be interesting to see if Churchill will return, because he's actually now appeared in 3 stories.
He has, absolutely, indeed. The Jazz Network says we're really hoping to see the Imperial Daleks.
Mm-hmm. Well, there's a special weapons Dalek. Is in there. That was an Imperial faction Dalek. They have confirmed there will be a special weapons Dalek back, and I would be surprised if they didn't have an Imperial Dalek.
Do you think...
I thought they were actually, out of all the classic Doctor Who Daleks, they were one of the best looking ones.
Do you think with the new Paradigm Daleks they can bring Davros back, or is it not?
You know, I'm not a huge fan of Davros. I'd rather they didn't. And I love that. I think that's a wonderful thing. It's very much a Frankenstein's monster thing, that of the scientist or the person creating that monster, and then that monster turning on them and destroying them. There's something wonderfully Freudian about it all, and we're going to come on to Genesis and the Daleks in a bit, but for me, I don't like the Daleks constantly turning back to Davros. I don't think we need to see Davros back. But that said, though, I thought Julian Bleach was so good in the role that I'd love to see him back. You know, I mean, that wouldn't be so bad. But potentially, Davros, I don't think was actually... I thought it was pretty obvious Davros escaped the last time.
I would have thought so. Absolutely, I would have thought so. He's going to be around somewhere. Mr. Tony Lee is saying, of course, that's the reason for the psychic paper. It stops the Doctor being thrown into the brig.
Yes.
It is the catch-all.
Okay, so definitely, Victory of the Daleks.
Yeah. It's
definitely one of those new Doctor Who stories, which I think is one of those ones that will appeal to all fans. It's new, modern Doctor Who, great special effects, great little storyline, Matt Smith, Karen Gillan, but the style of it, I think will appeal to fans of classic Doctor Who, and it's also one of those ones that really work within the 44-minute format. Really nice, very well, good contained story.
Definitely, cool.
Now, moving on now, classic Doctor Who. We've had our look at modern Doctor Who and classic Doctor Who. One of my own favourite Doctors, Sylvester McCoy.
Yeah.
And this week, the final Sylvester McCoy story, Greatest Show in the Galaxy, has finally been released.
So now the entire
DVD.
collection is available.
Yes. It's kind of like, I love Sylvester McCoy as a Doctor. I do find his time as a Doctor very interesting, because I felt it started off terribly and got better. And I don't mean him as the Doctor, but the scripts and the directing and the stories were really... Season 24, I think, was one of the worst seasons of Doctor Who. Then he had season 25, which was kind of like a mixture of very good and very bad. Yeah. And then season 26 was brilliant. And I feel Greatest Show in the Galaxy, for me, was the start of really... You'd had Remembrance of the Daleks at the start of the season, but then the season finished with Greatest Show in the Galaxy, and this really said to me, this is a really good Doctor we've got here.
So anyway, for all those who haven't watched Sylvester McCoy, we've asked Barry Aldridge to come up with his top 5 this week of Sylvester McCoy stories, all of which you can now get on DVD. And so we'll hand you over to Barry Aldridge.
Hello guys, and welcome to another Talking Who Top 5 from me, Barry Aldridge here. And this week I'm here with us celebrating the release of Sylvester McCoy's final story on DVD, The Greatest Show in the Galaxy, which came out on Monday. I'm going to be doing my top 5 favourite Sylvester McCoy stories. Now, for some people wondering, Greatest Show in the Galaxy is not in my top 5 because I've only seen it once. And all the stories in my top 5 I've actually seen more than twice. That's right. And Sylvester McCoy was the first ever Doctor I ever watched, though, as well, when I was like 5 years old. And that was my first fascination, though, with Doctor Who as well. So it was a good choice from Elsnar and Sean to give me this top 5. I absolutely going to enjoy doing this top 5. But like I said, every single story in my top 5, I've seen them at least twice. So, and I will admit, they're mainly stories, though, from his final 2 seasons, which I thought they were the best seasons from him, and also some of the best seasons from Doctor Who in the 1980s. So, let's get on with the top 5. At number 5, I've got to give it to a story called The Happiness Patrol. Yes, that's right. I mean, I know this story has gotten a lot of negativity, though, in the past and that, but I really like this one with Helen A as a character sort of thing, doing a parody of, what would you say, Margaret Thatcher. I mean, Graham Curry definitely wrote it along that sort of scale. I think he was trying to take the mick out of politics during that time, and that, you know, it's sort of like a risque type move, but I really like it as well. I think it's one of those fascinating stories that really goes there. Sigma Alpha and that, and, you know, this happiness and that, and also the Candyman, probably the most scariest villain in Doctor Who ever, because he's made of licorice all sorts and that. Oh, I really can't stand that villain. I think that's one of the reasons why I don't eat licorice all sorts, because of the Candyman. But I will say, I do recommend this story. It's really fun, really good. Very, very dark in places as well, especially the ending, I have to admit. So, some people expecting a happy ending, forget it, but I liked it quite a lot, and yeah, I really liked when the Candyman, well, you know, got his desserts. It's a good story. I definitely recommend it. Very, very good. At number 4, I'm going to give it to a story called Battlefield from Sylvester McCoy's final season. It was written by Ben Abramovich, who was one of the strongest writers during that period as well. It's about some Merlin or Arthur's time, this queen sorceress, and that comes back through time, goes to the future to try and find Merlin, who turns out to be the Doctor, who's hidden the Excalibur from Arthur and that. And I will say it's a wonderful piece of work. It even features Nick Courtney's final appearance in Doctor Who, played Brigadier Lethbridge, but he did make an appearance in Sarah Jane, but this was Nick Courtney's final ever appearance though in Doctor Who. It was wonderfully done, and Nick Courtney still holds his own. It's a great story in that, and I love the location shooting. It's all on location. It's really, really well done. I do like Doctor Who stories that are all on location. Gives it a bit more atmosphere, a bit more suspense and that. I really like, you know, where the Brigadier finally gets one on an enemy, which is really good in that. And what a way to go out for Nick Courtney in that. It was really quite cool, and it was really good. I found some of it very, very humorous in that. And it's a wonderful 4-part. I do recommend Battlefield, so do go and check that out, definitely. At number 3, I'm going to give it to The Curse of Fenric. This is a wonderful story. I have to say, this is truly is one of the fantastic stories that really pulls you in that. And this is one of the first instances of classic Doctor Who where character development for a companion really comes in. A lot of people say, well, Series 1 in 2005 actually brought in character development to companions. This actually was one of the first, actually, to really go really deep into the characters. Yes, it did some of that, though, during the 60s in The Edge of Destruction, I remember. But this really came into it. I mean, Ace, Sophie Aldridge, really put in the performance of her life and that. I really like the fact the clashes of faith, the Vikings, the Curse, the Hemobores, and the Doctor playing mind games, being so dark and that. It's really, really good. It's a wonderful 4-part written by Ian Briggs, who introduced Ace as a character, though, in Dragonfire, and he really gives it something really special. And you find out the revelations about Ace's mother and all that sort of thing, and oh god, it's really gripping. I have to say, it's a really gripping 4-part. I have to say, I really recommend this one, and it really does pull you in. And character development from Ace is phenomenal, I have to say. And Ian Briggs got it bang on though with the writing in this one. It really was quite cool. At number 2, I'm going to give it to the actual final ever story from Sylvester McCoy. It's called Survival, and it's basically set in Fairfoul, where everyone disappears and that, and Ace and the Doctor are wondering what the hell's going on, and then it find out there's some cheater people. And of course, it features Anthony Ainley as the Master. His final appointment as the Master as well, which is a huge shame. I mean, he passed away a few years ago, and it's just really good. I mean, I like, again, another location show, I mean, which I forgot to mention though with The Curse of Fenric. Wonderful locations, very, very good ideas. Nice guest appearance from Hale and Pace as well, which is really good. They were a comedy duo though back in the 80s in the UK and that, which was kind of cool. It just really does pull you in, this one as well, and it's not got the strong character development, but the story pulls you in. It's just wonderful, just seeing the Doctor and the Master having their final battle. Oh my goodness me, it's just absolutely wonderful, and I really do like this story, and it really does give it sort of a menacing look there. There we go. And finally, at number 1, my favourite Sylvester McCoy story of all time is actually also the very first ever story I ever watched of Doctor Who, and it's called Remembrance of the Daleks. My first ever encounter with the Daleks, and oh, what can I say? Again, another story by Brennan Abramovich, who was one of the best writers in Doctor Who during the 1980s. He was just fantastic. He really gave it an almighty good. It's set in 1963, the same year as Doctor Who started and that, and it was part of the 25th anniversary year and that. I think this is just really cool. So many great ideas, and that the Daleks flying for the first time up the stairs. Oh my god, that was an incredible moment. One of the best cliffhangers ever. The Doctor and Ace going through Coal Manor School and that. I think that's what it's called, Coal Manor School. If I got it wrong, I do apologise. I've forgotten the name of the school. I don't know why. And it's wonderful that it has sort of characters in there that really make you believe in a scenario in that. And the Daleks are really good. The two warring faction Daleks, one standing by the Davros and the other one standing by their own renegade sort of thing, which it is actually kind of believable. It's like two warring factions going after the hand of Omega. It's just amazing. And the Doctor being a third party makes it a lot more interesting. And there's a lot of interesting revelations in it. Really, really good story in that. I'd highly recommend that. And that is my top 5 favourite Sylvester McCoy stories, though, guys. And thanks very much, though, for watching. I will be back, though, with another top 5 probably next month. We'll have to wait and see when that will be. I'll find that out from Nelson Arnshaw. Anyway, guys, take care. Thank you very much, though, for watching. Peace.
Well, for that, Barry.
Cool. So, Happiness Patrol, Battlefield, Curse of Fenric, Survival, and Remembrance of the Daleks.
It's kind of interesting seeing that top 5.
Yeah.
Because it kind of like just shows you how Doctor Who as a show and how its style is always changing. I think how my top 5 would be completely different.
Yeah.
Absolutely completely different to that top 5.
So what would be your top 5?
At number 1, I would have Ghostlight.
Yeah. Okay.
Number 2, I'd have the Happiness Patrol.
Yeah.
Number 3, the Curse of Fenric. Number 4, Survival. And number 5, Remembrance of the Daleks.
That's interesting. Curse of Fenric is really memorable for me. Well, actually, both Remembrance and Daleks, because I think Remembrance of the Daleks suddenly, having been in and out of Doctor Who, I think throughout the 80s, Remembrance of the Daleks suddenly brought Doctor Who back. You know, and it's like, okay, now I'm going to make sure I won't miss a single week. But then Curse of Fenric, suddenly it's like, oh, Doctor Who could be scary again.
Well, Ghostlight was like that as well. I felt the first episode of Ghostlight is one of the most powerful. Kind of like falls apart a bit in the third episode, but the first episode is amazingly powerful. And what I find very interesting about season 25 and 26 of Doctor Who is considering what a tight budget it was done on. It's actually some of the best looking Doctor Who, and it just makes you wonder what could have been done if the BBC had actually pumped some money into it at the time.
I mean, I remember watching when the spaceship lands and Remembrance of the Daleks saying, wow, can special effects get any better than this? Of course, a couple of months later we had Star Trek The Next Generation.
I never liked the effects on... I always thought the effects on Star Trek The Next Generation actually looked kind of tacky.
But Remembrance looked great. And anyway, we've got Mr. Tony Lee saying, Survival over Fenric, travesty.
Well, that's the thing, everybody's entitled to their own opinion on... I like Ghostlight and I like Greatest Show in the Galaxy more than I like Curse of Fenric. Doctor Who, everybody... And I hate it this when I go on, say, Gallifrey Base or something like that, and they say, this story's being released on DVD, and you get people getting really aggressive about it, and you're like... Doctor Who's a show, everybody, you know, I bet there's some fans of Time Lash out there, or I'm absolutely amazed when I see that there's fans of Trial of a Time Lord, but that's the thing about Doctor Who, that, you know, everything, you know, it's just, its style is just, it's a continuing show with continuing characters, but it also has an anthology format style, which allows you to constantly change. So
we're going to try and not move because we assume the camera seems to finding hard to find the focus.
Right. Stay still.
Andy Oliver says Battlefield's very underrated, really very good.
I don't like Battlefield very much myself, but.
And Paul Bowler on Twitter says great choice of 7th Doctor stories, Barry. Remembrance of the Daleks is awesome.
They're all... I think it's literally like from about halfway from Tom Baker all the way through to Paul McGann. They're all out on DVD now.
If you're a new fan and you haven't yet watched any of Sylvester McCoy's... Anyway, those 5 are a great way to start.
Yeah.
Check them out.
But
get them out on DVD.
All the Sylvester McCoys are out on DVD now, so you can make your own top 5 choice.
And you can actually watch them all in order as well. Unlike those who just buy the DVD and it's sort of like a random order. You can actually buy the DVDs and watch them all in order. Cool.
So do we have this podcast?
We do. We have...
Right, so what's this podcast? Because you say got a big sign here, if it arrives.
It's MotherWho does our podcast reviews, and this week she is looking at a new audio drama series, an independent one.
Uh-huh.
And it's called Minister of Chance, starring Sylvester McCoy.
Oh, wow.
And Paul McGann. And this is her review.
Hello, welcome to MotherWho's review. Today I'm in the very lucky position of being able to review The Minister of Chance. I say lucky, however, the fact that I can talk about it but not really tell you about it in case I spoil it for those who haven't listened is going to prove very difficult for someone such as me. So what is The Minister of Chance? Well, on their website it's described as an audio science fiction fantasy series in the tradition of the BBC Radiophonic Workshop and the best in radiophonics, and I can categorically state that this is true. It is an absolute wonder to listen to. Its rich musical score and sound effects are perfectly in tune with some of our finest actors' performances. Being a Whovian, the thing that drew me to The Minister of Chance initially were the facts that, well, the Minister is a Time Lord, and that both Sylvester McCoy and Paul McGann, two of our past Doctors, both act in this production. However, neither of them play a role anything like our beloved Doctor. They both get to show off their evil and malicious side really, really well. The story is based on Tantillion, and we are introduced to Kitty in episode 1. She is played by ex-EastEnders actress Lauren Crace. She is one feisty girl, a barmaid in a local tavern, on a world in which science is outlawed and therefore magic rules, because without science there are no other ways to explain the world. Whilst working in the tavern, a mysterious visitor comes and asks for a Professor Canther, an outlawed scientist. This is where you begin to feel there is a little bit more to Kitty than meets the eye. It turns out Kitty's closest friend is Professor Canther, played wonderfully by another favourite of mine, Jenny Agutter. Professor Canther has been in hiding but gets captured in this first episode and imprisoned, and her scientific skills forced into evil use. I don't really want to go into too much more detail about the story itself because it's so wonderfully scripted by Dan Freeman that each episode leaves you begging for more, and I'm quite sure he would hunt me down and sonic me if I gave away too much. When I was listening, it took me back to my younger days, before internet, before even Pong on the Atari, when I would sit for hours with headphones on, listening to radio dramas or tapes of audio dramas and be swept away into some other world. I listened to War of the Worlds until my cassette tape snapped, and one of my kids has been listening to The Minister of Chance every night in bed for months, begging me for the next episodes. The production is fantastic. The musical score and sound effects are perfect, and the list of actors is quite staggering. The Minister himself is played by Julian Waldham, and in episode 4 we are introduced to Tamsin Greig, with the additions of Paul Darrow, who played Avon in Blake 7. It's a veritable who's who of great British drama actors. The most important thing I want to tell you about this production is that it is all fan funded, and without you or me the next episodes won't be made. To fund the episodes, we can purchase items from the website, including this very dapper ring pull. Items get listed on eBay also, the most recent being a Minister of Chance t-shirt that was signed by both our previous Doctors, Sylvester McCoy and Paul McGann. How cool is that? Currently, episode 4 is 1/3 funded, and you can pay various amounts which entitle you to various goodies. £20 will get you an early copy of episode 4. £100 will get you a personalised voicemail message recorded for your answer phone from either Paul Darrow or Sylvester McCoy. What would you have Avon or the Doctor say on your voicemail? It's a very exciting prospect. I really, really, really can't recommend this science fiction audio drama highly enough. Its production is brilliant, perfect. I really, really think you should all download it. And the best part about it is it's free to download, either from iTunes or from the Minister of Chance website. And as you've probably guessed, Minister of Chance gets a massive thumbs up from MotherWho.
Well, there you go. Minister of
And
Chance.
Mother
Thank
Who?
you. It's MotherWho. Now, I don't know if you noticed on her video, but every time she does one, she's got a new picture behind her, framed. So I'm assuming she's got MotherWho. You've got lots of framed Doctor Who pictures, but by coincidence, it just happened to have Daleks this time, and we didn't.
Serendipity.
We didn't organise that. That was just pure coincidence. I think that it goes out of focus whenever I wave my hand.
Yes,
Stop waving my hands. I'm too much of a hand waver. So anyway, before we go on to Genesis Daleks, any updates for midnight?
No real updates at the moment.
Tickets
I
are...
think ticket. I mean, whew. But tickets are going at an incredible rate. But just to update you all, in case you don't know, Midnight is a convention that I'm running for Doctor Who fans and Torchwood fans, which is taking place December 14th, 15th and 16th. It's taking place at the Birmingham Hilton Hotel. It's a follow-on from my previous event, the 11th Hour, which we have Matt Smith along at. And this time, how can you equal having had Matt Smith along? You get David Tennant. We've got David Tennant attending this event. And not only we've got David Tennant, we've got Billy Piper.
Yep.
And from...
first convention.
First convention. And from Torchwood, we've got Eve Miles and Gareth David Lloyd.
Yeah, fantastic.
As Torchwood. We've also got from behind the scenes, we've got the Eagle Award-winning comic book author Tony Lee, who writes all the Doctor Who comics for IDW.
Who's in the comments box right now.
Yes, that's why I'm bigging him up so much. We've got Jim Swallow, who writes for Big Finish and also for BBC Books, and he's also written stuff for Stargate and for Star Trek and a lot of other franchises. We've got Phil Ford, who was he wrote The Waters of Mars and wrote virtually every episode of Sarah Jane Adventures, as well as producing the series. We've got the Doctor Who expert Gary Russell. So we've got a very, very packed lineup already, and there's more guests to come. However, I'm not going to be announcing any more guests probably for another couple of months, because I'm feeling the ticket sales are going fine. I've already got some pretty big names in there, and I can actually get some other big names. A lot of guests don't want to commit far in advance, so I could get guests now, but ones who've done a lot of events.
We've had a comment saying that awesome guest Tony Lee is going to be there. Can't wait, and that's from Mr. Tony Lee.
It was a lot of the fans pointed out that when Tony Lee did a guest talk with Jim Swallow, the two of them bore an uncanny resemblance to Iron Man and Thor.
Yes, that's right. It was the Doctor Who's version of Tony Stark, and I understand you might be bringing your little arc reactor next time.
We'll have to see. Have to see if Tony brings that along with him.
But yes, Tony says he'll contribute to Talking Who with a video blog. So there we go. That's perfect. That would be great.
So moving on, our next somebody else. Can you get Matt Smith to come back again?
That's from Yuchi Tyra.
I'm sure we will see Matt Smith again at some other Star Fury event. However, it won't be at midnight.
There you go.
Yes, because we've already got David Tennant.
You've got it's it's David Tennant's turn to do the talks.
Yeah.
And
so now,
he'll probably be very busy promoting the Christmas special. He'll probably be in America doing Christmas special type of talks and stuff. But anyway, Genesis of the Daleks is our classic DVD review for this time. We do have
a classic.
We do have a short clip, but it's a clip that's been fan made, so it has modern music on it.
Okay.
But for 1,000 generations, it is a name that will bring fear and terror.
We'd like you to return to Scardo at a point in time before the Daleks evolve.
You mean avert their creation?
When victory is ours, we'll wipe every trace of the Thals and their city from the face of this land. Our battle cry will be total extermination of the Thals.
Who is this Davros?
Our greatest scientist.
This will be a moment that will live in history. Davros has changed the direction of our research into something which is immoral, evil. Chemical weapons had already started to produce genetic mutations. The mutants. Davros started experiments to establish our final mutational form. Some of the things that he created were horrific. That is our future.
Wow. I mean,
You got rocket ships. You got mutants. You got quarries.
You've got
mad scientists.
Actually, what I would say on this story is, for a TV show that was going out at 5:30 on a Saturday afternoon at the time, straight after Grandstand, and was billed as children's programming, and it starts off with a parody of Ingmar Bergman's The Seventh Seal.
Yeah.
And then it moves on to debates on the futility of war and of total warfare, moving on to debates about genetic experimentation and racial purity, and even the rights of committing genocide. And is there ever a point of whether genocide is correct, or the use of nuclear warfare, can that ever be justified?
Yeah.
And the amount of concepts that are being thrown around in this story are absolutely amazing. And when you consider that, you know, what had been done previously on, and I'm not knocking them, but what had been done for the past 10 years on Doctor Who, and then suddenly a story like this comes along, and it really did show in this season. You had this and the Ark in Space, and it did show that Robert Holmes and Philip Hinchcliffe, as a team behind Doctor Who, were really just going to be doing just something completely different with the show.
And this wasn't even the series closer.
No, they actually closed on a bit of a down with Revenge of the Star, which is a bit more of a traditional story. But apparently this story came about. It wasn't even commissioned by Philip Hinchcliffe. Basically what happened was Barry Letts, the producer at the time, knew he was leaving the show, and he knew that John Pertwee was leaving the show as well. And to keep it going, to kind of like help introduce the new Doctor, who they didn't know who the new Doctor was going to be at the moment, he commissioned a Dalek storyline, a Cybermen storyline, and Robert Holmes said they'd also bring back the Sontarans. So that way they felt you'd have enough classic monsters going on to keep the regular viewers going, if Tom Baker didn't quite work out as the Doctor, or whoever it was going to be the new Doctor. And apparently the first script that Terry Nation sent in, they looked at it and they said, this is exactly the same as every other Dalek story you've written. And they came up with the idea of, why don't you do a genesis of the Daleks, explain how the Daleks came about. And you do have to wonder, though, how much of it was rewritten by Robert Holmes, because story-wise, it's like nothing else Terry Nations did before
not at all.
or after.
Yeah.
I mean, when you see his next stories, Android Invasion and Destiny of the Daleks, they go back to the typical Terry Nation style. This is very much in the style of what Robert is. Very violent.
Sure.
It's very dark. There's a lot of adult themes and concepts at play in here, and it actually even plays into modern Doctor Who. It was a huge influence on Russell T Davies, because the concept behind the Time War in Doctor Who, which is the whole foundation of new Doctor Who, Russell T Davies says the Time War starts here, and it was the Time Lords, not the Daleks, who start the Time War. And the concept here, which is interesting, the Time Lords have foreseen that in the future the Daleks will become the dominant life form in the universe. So they send the Doctor back to their very inception with he's got three options in his mission. To either totally kill off the Daleks, to either change their creation so they become less aggressive and less likely to become the dominant force of the universe, or if he can find an inherent weakness in them so that they can be defeated in the future. And the Doctor actually, interestingly enough, and you just really couldn't see this happening, maybe to an extent on Star Trek, but on no other show, where the Doctor actually comes to a moral dilemma over being in a position to wipe out his enemies, but to think to himself, he can't bring himself to commit, even to the Daleks, to commit genocide.
Yeah.
And it's some of the most powerful stuff ever touched in Doctor Who.
But it's not a mistake he'll ever make again.
Well, actually, you actually have it with Christopher Eccleston. He has a point where he can destroy the Daleks again, and he finds he really can't bring himself to do that because, you know, even though the ends justify the means, it's too much for the Doctor to bear. On the flip side of it, it's such brilliant concepts, but at the same time, you've got these two races who have been at war for centuries. It's a 1,000-year war, and the concept, you know, it's a really interesting concept here that two races have been at war with each other for so long that technologically they're progressing backwards.
They're de-evolving.
But the very interesting thing here is that they've got cities which are within walking distance of each other. I mean, that makes no sense. You have the whole thing of the Doctor and Harry and Sarah being kidnapped and escaping all the time.
Yeah.
There's secret tunnels which actually link the two cities. Some of that just doesn't, you know, it doesn't really make sense. But what's there is so good. It just doesn't make sense. But it really is one of the best Doctor Who stories. It just comes. It's so well directed. It's so well acted.
I mean, any new fan who really wants to look at something from the past, this is a great story to get in with because you're dealing with familiar characters. You've got Sarah Jane Smith for a start. You know, you've got the Doctor, but you also have the Daleks, and you have Davros who turns up again in Stolen Earth. But it does lead to. It does lead to the question about the Daleks' own timeline, because obviously prior to this, the Doctor has had various adventures against the Daleks. When he first ever encounters them, they are essentially a dead or dying race.
Yeah.
The Thals have...
Well, the original Dalek
The Thals
story,
have so de-evolved, they're just cavemen, practically.
But the original Dalek story from William Hartnell's, really, if you try to put it within any form of timeline with everything else, it doesn't make sense. And it's kind of like, even straight away with Daleks' invasion of Earth, it's almost like they kind of ignore a lot of what happened in the first Dalek story because they've got this cool characters and they wanted to bring them back. But that's one of the things about Doctor Who, and I really do think Doctor Who's been going for 50 years, it's 50 years next year. If you start worrying too much, even then Doctor Who's been going for 10 years, if you start worrying too much about continuity, you're going to start getting up your own arse. And that was a problem I felt that happened for a period in Colin Baker and Sylvester McCoy's period, that new viewers couldn't watch the show because it was so worried about what happened 20 years ago that it would discourage new people from watching.
But certainly, the idea behind the Doctor interfering at the genesis of the Daleks, it essentially puts the Daleks on a whole new course because, of course, the main antagonist from this point on isn't necessarily the Daleks. It's now Davros.
Yeah,
and Davros is the one that keeps coming back.
Well, from a writer's point of view, it's a bit like in the next story, Revenge of the Cybermen, they introduce the Cyber Leader, and from a writer's point of view, when you have a race of monsters, you really actually do need a figurehead. You need somebody who can give the exposition, who can communicate with the heroes, as it were. And one of the big problems with the Daleks is they're almost like this kind of like faceless, and you'd have all these Daleks, and it really, from a writer's point of view, was... Although one of the ways you could have just got around it is you just have a Dalek leader. And you'll notice the Emperor Dalek, or the Supreme Dalek. And in Star Trek, you got the Borg, and they kind of like had, for a period, you had Locutus of Borg. and they introduced the Cyber Leader to the Cybermen. And so Davros, I think, was an attempt by the writers to introduce some,
and it's not one-dimensional.
But the problem for me with Davros, I think the only story he really worked for me was in this one. And I felt that Michael Wisher's performance was brilliant. I feel up until David Tennant's period, they weren't able to find another actor who could give it the gravitas and the depth that Michael Wisher was really. And there's this one sequence in which the Doctor and Davros are discussing science and morality together, and this really powerful stuff. But one of the reasons it's so powerful is because Tom Baker and Michael Wisher could just really play it so well. But I just think after then, it's Davros became just too much of the shouting megalomaniac, and unfortunately the Daleks, they became just almost like his bodyguards. They became less interesting as a result. And I'm not much of a fan of Destiny of the Daleks or Resurrection of the Daleks or some of those other ones. They just don't work so well as me, largely because of Davros. And I think the way he's been used and the way the Daleks have been used in modern Doctor Who is much better.
But I was going to say, it's obviously with the knowledge that Davros has gained from the Doctor, is that he's effectively changes the course of how the Daleks evolve, how, he creates an ambition. I mean, prior to this, Davros doesn't believe there isn't even such a thing as anyone that lives outside of Skaro. Skaro is the centre of the universe, and there's no, But now it's like he knows that the Daleks are on course now to go and conquer the universe, and maybe they do that because of the Doctor arriving on Skaro several thousand years before they're supposed to. So the question is whether the timeline prior to Tom Baker for the Daleks can actually exist, or whether it's now an alternative timeline, parallel universe.
Very interestingly enough, when the Daleks returned in Peter David, do you remember what the story is? Can anybody? Was it Resurrection of the Daleks?
Yeah,
it's a Peter Davison story, and it was written by Eric Savard, and it was supposed to be in season 20, and they had to hold it over, and they did it in season 21 because Terry Nation had to sign off on any scripts, and in the original script, Terry Nation refused to sign off on it, and in the original script, it starts off with the Daleks are now no longer the most feared race in the universe, and they've been beaten by the Movellans, and the reason because of this is that the Doctor's interference in Genesis of the Daleks has resulted in them not being as powerful as they would have been. And that's the reason they go looking for Davros, because they want Davros to redesign them to make them as they should have been. And that was the original concept. And Terry Nation refused to sign off on that concept because he didn't want the Daleks as being portrayed as weak in any way. Interesting. Although he still actually allowed the final script to having had them being defeated by the Movellans.
So we're saying goodbye to Tony Lee, who's got to make a conference call with Los Angeles. Lots of speculation about the photograph from Asylum of the Daleks that's supposed to be released by the BBC after midnight. Yeah.
And tomorrow, I believe, is at 8 o'clock on BBC One.
New trailer.
They've got a new trailer for Doctor Who, which I'm very much looking forward to seeing.
Absolutely. For those who are watching this a day late, then just go watch it right now.
Yeah. I'm sure it'll be put on the BBC's official website, and it'll be up on YouTube within minutes of it being aired.
Indeed.
It seems so long since Doctor Who was last on the air. I'm sure there's a lot of excitement for this. So.
Brad Renfro says Genesis of the Daleks is my favourite of all time, my first ever Doctor Who story. And Gallifrey Forever 97 says Genesis of the Daleks, such a classic.
It is. It's just absolute, and it's kind of like there was this whole period of stories produced by Philip Hinchcliffe and with Tony Lee, with Robert Holmes on charge. And is this the leaked? Well, it's basically, we've got it here. Apparently, the picture's already been leaked, and if you look at the picture, you've got here there you've got a special weapons Dalek there. I said there would be a special weapons
from Remembrance of the Daleks.
From Remembrance of the... That is a Dalek from the first Dalek story, because you can see the rings
and it's got
are slightly different.
They don't have the slats.
That's a modern Dalek there. That one looks like a Genesis of the Dalek style Dalek, but as you can see, it's basically the Doctor trying to save Amy from a horde of Daleks, but they are Daleks from all different periods.
Yeah.
But you've got here, and what I love here is you've got a special weapons Dalek right up here in the front.
Because that really reinforces, because it's such a different Dalek.
Yes, this reinforces that. The in the novelisation of Remembrance of the Daleks, it states there's only one special weapons Dalek.
And
that's a red. That looks red. I'm wondering if that's the Dalek Supreme.
Dalek Supreme
could be. Let's have a look at its. If you look at its eyes, not its eyes. It's kind of like its lights. Those are square. So that looks like the Dalek Supreme.
Yeah.
Dalek Supreme. But then that one's got slats like that as well. So. Well, we'll just have to wait and see. This is getting me all excited. Getting me excited for the new series. The Daleks are back.
So what I'll do is that was from Autonomous. So I will now retweet that. So if you're following at Talking Who, we've retweeted that picture for all to see. Hopefully.
Right, so that rounds up the show for this week. We've looked at Modern Who. Looked at Matt Smith's period.
Yep.
We've gone back and we've looked at Classic Who. We've looked at it all
McCoy,
this week.
Minister of Chance.
Yeah.
Well, we don't know. It quite possibly at the end of this month we might even have a new episode of it.
Yes.
I mean, we don't know. We don't know yet.
Well, Asylum of the Daleks is due soon. It's either going to be the last week of August or the first week of September.
So the previews,
which is annoying because I'm in Atlanta for DragonCon at the end of this month.
The previews are mid-August, so that usually might give a sense that actually it's 2 weeks ahead of the actual broadcast.
Yeah.
So it could be the end of August. If it's the end of August, well, we'll have to figure out a way to come back before the end of the month then to review it. But like I said, both of us are away in September.
Yeah.
So there will be a gap before we can continue doing the next episodes. But in the meantime, follow us at Talking Who on Twitter for all the latest updates. There's everything again.
Yeah.
Please do hit the subscribe button on YouTube, folks, on our channel. It really is helpful. The more subscribers we can get. TalkingWho.com is our website. Facebook.com, those video guys. Twitter.com at Talking Who. Blip TV Talking Who is, and of course you can also download short clips. Short versions on iTunes now as a podcast. It's been a blast. It's been very good fun. Always good to talk Daleks.
And we'll see you on the next Talking Who.
Goodbye for now.
I better get going now.